one's ever really gone.
Aside from my soul.
Disney Star Wars movies have made me a bigger Star Wars fan. Yep, I mean it. These movies have made me appreciate Star Wars in a new light. Because I no longer see Star Wars as this perfect franchise with complex issues and amazingly consistent storytelling, I see it as a complete mess that has gotten worse and worse as the years have gone by. But hey, those first three really slap. Even though I've changed a lot as a Star Wars fan over the past couple of years, I still feel pretty much the same with the originals and prequels. The originals are not perfect, and a lot of my love for them does come from nostalgia, but it's still a consistently well-told trilogy with likable characters, groundbreaking effects, and an all-around sense of fun. It doesn't matter what you personally think about them, maybe you think they're a tad overrated, but you can't deny they've had a significant impact. So not only are they vital to film history, they're also really fun to watch. The prequels, meanwhile, are some of the most embarrassing movies in recent memory that try to be some grand-scale, deep trilogy to elevate Star Wars from some basic children's fantasy series. And it fails miserably. But they are also some of the funniest movies I've ever seen that have given us some of the best memes from recent memory.
It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground!
So even though I know they aren't good, I can't say I don't enjoy returning to them every once in a while to laugh at. Then we have the Disney movies, which if I'm being honest, have probably changed the most in the past couple of years. Never has there been a trilogy to ever begin so strongly for me and end so poorly. That's right, I started off being an advocate for the Disney Star Wars. When that first Force Awakens teaser dropped, I was super excited. Compare that with my reaction to the Rise of Skywalker trailer.
We said meh. M-E-H. Meh.
So yeah, thanks Disney Star Wars, you've really opened my eyes and made me appreciate Star Wars more. Too bad I couldn't appreciate you. But you know what, if I gave the prequels a second chance, if I gave Rogue One a chance, hell, if I gave Solo a chance, then I have to be fair and give these movies a chance too. Because a lot of you may think I'm pretty crazy for being nicer to the prequels, but I'm sorry, I'm being honest. I really can't stand this trilogy as a whole. Now that doesn't mean I hate every little detail about each of these movies, I'm saying as a whole, I have numerous problems with it. But that's why I'm making this video, to analyze these movies and see what it is I like and dislike from them. Buckle up, folks. This may be a big one, so let's begin. I don't think I've ever been as excited for a movie or any piece of media as I was for Force Awakens. The only other thing that comes close was the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, and even then I was more cautious with how it would turn out. Spoiler alert, it's great, better than Force Awakens by a country mile. My hype for Force Awakens was pre-Last Jedi, so that means I was blindingly optimistic, so the thought of it sucking wasn't an option in my mind. This would be the greatest movie ever made, and I wasn't going to hear otherwise. When that first teaser with the Millennium Falcon flying upside down dropped, I was ecstatic. When that official trailer dropped with Luke's voice from Return of the Jedi and Han's reveal with Chewie, I was even more excited. When that final trailer dropped on that one Monday Night Football game, it was the first time I had watched Monday Night Football in a while. When numerous TV spots were dropping online, giving away more and more scenes from the movie, I said, okay, I get it, that's enough, can you release the movie now? To prepare for episode 7, I was doing a little revisiting. I saw the prequels for the first time since I was a kid and thought, yeah, they're not good, but hey, they're Star Wars. I watched the original movies and thought, yeah, these are good. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't be on the internet all throughout Thursday and Friday the week of the premiere. I couldn't be on Rotten Tomatoes even though I couldn't stop looking at that 98%. I couldn't be on iFunny because I couldn't risk looking in the comment section and seeing a spoiler. Are you cringing yet? This is who I was when I was 17. Then came Saturday morning. I had bought tickets for Saturday because I didn't get Friday tickets, and I was ready. After a year of hype and excitement, I was ready to see this thing. After years of dreaming of being in the theater watching it, I was actually there ready to watch it. And then the movie started, and I loved it. The Force Awakens is easily one of my favorite movie theater experiences because of the amount of fun I had watching it. It was fun to see the opening crawl on the big screen. I hadn't before. It was fun to see the Millennium Falcon fly. It was fun to see the original characters again. It was fun to see what life was like 30 years after Return of the Jedi. That's the key word here. Fun. I didn't care there were inconsistencies. I didn't care that this movie was basically undoing the original trilogy. I didn't care that these new characters weren't written all that well. And I certainly didn't care about it basically being a retread of A New Hope. The Force Awakens was a fun time and it made me excited for Star Wars again. But that was 5 years ago. Times have changed. Now I won't say I straight up hate The Force Awakens now. In fact, I consider it to be the best Disney Star Wars movie. It's the only one that I still consistently like, but even then I have my problems with it. For starters, I do find it annoying that it has a lot of similarities to A New Hope. Now to be clear, I'm not saying it's a remake of A New Hope, but yeah, it kinda is. It's basically taking the skeleton plot of A New Hope and covering it with new stuff. Now, unfortunately, that new stuff isn't exactly new. See, the stormtroopers look different from usual. See, the Death Star looks different than usual. See, the main cast is different than usual. They're not white guys, and that's apparently enough to make it different because these characters are really uninteresting. Basically what I'm saying is, yes, this movie has a lot of good stuff, but it's not because it did any of it on its own. Now some people may not mind the similarities, because having Force Awakens be similar to A New Hope is like poetry, it rhymes. Different generations experience similar stuff as the previous generations, it's all connected. Okay, well, that sucks. Because doesn't it seem a little fucked up that the previous trilogy was about stopping this tyrannical dictatorship, only for 30 years later it meant absolutely nothing because now there's another fascist government but with a bigger Death Star? Oh, but hell, it's more realistic that way. Great, glad to see this fantasy franchise aim for realism. Also, is the First Order the new governing force of the galaxy? There's apparently a republic still that funds the resistance. So you know, it's not really a resistance then if it's government funded. The original set it up nicely by showing that the Empire was the ruling party of the galaxy. Is the First Order in charge, or is the Republic still in charge? Is it really that hard to establish who's who in this world? Also, can I just say that the Resistance is one of the lamest names for a rebellion group ever? It's so plain and boring sounding. Anyway, back to real criticisms. When you really think about it, the entirety of the original trilogy is made obsolete. All that fighting and rebelling against the Empire? Entirely pointless, because now there's a new Empire that's not the Empire, but it's the Empire. Ah shit, here we go again, right guys? Maybe people wouldn't have liked it if the movie was different from other Star Wars movies. That's what JJ claims, but we'll get to that later, don't you worry. The point I'm trying to make is that Force Awakens is a pretty bad sequel. In fact, it does a lot of stuff that a bad sequel does. Retells the same story as the first one, relies heavily on nostalgia, doesn't expand on the lore of the universe in any way we haven't seen before, doesn't continue the story in any new compelling way, doesn't introduce new themes, doesn't leave any lasting impact on the franchise.
Hey, wait a minute.
Mr. Citizen Hal, I represent Schaffrillas Productions. I have a court order demanding an immediate halt to this blatant plagiarism. Boys?
Yeah.
Well, would it be alright with you if I just lay down in the street and died?
Yes, that would be acceptable.
Okay, so the movie isn't exactly original, and yeah, that bothers me a little, but I honestly don't mind at times. I know this is a very subjective way to approach the movie, and I totally understand the people who hate it. Honestly, looking back, I can see why people hated this. But it's also really funny seeing people call it the worst movie ever when Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker came right after it. Like I said, Force Awakens is a bad sequel, but in terms of how it fares as a movie, I can't say it was all that bad. If this was advertised as like a fan film that wasn't officially canon with the rest of the universe, I feel like people would have been a little more forgiving. It feels like a love letter to Star Wars, kinda like how Spider-Verse is a love letter to Spider-Man, or Hot Fuzz is to action movies, or Looney Tunes Back in Action is to Looney Tunes. I swear to God, the fact that that movie gets undermined by Space Jam is a goddamn shame. It's so much better than Space Jam. Still, the build-up for Force Awakens was insane, as it was being advertised as being this grand return for Star Wars. It was also Star Wars being made by people who grew up with the originals. It seemed to be made by people who were passionate about Star Wars. And you know what? As much as I make fun of this movie, it does feel like a lot of passion went into making it. Again, like I said, if this was a standalone fan film, it wouldn't be all that bad. But, here's the thing. It's not a standalone film, it's an official sequel. I'm glad you all had fun, but the movie isn't that great. Why does the lightsaber called a Rey? How did Kylo meet Snoke and turn to the dark side? Why wasn't Finn the main character? What especially sucks about this movie is the fact that it raises so many questions. Well, whatever, I guess. At least those questions will be answered in later films. It's not like these movies weren't planned ahead of time. That would be absurd. Look, I'm not gonna lie, this film is not that great. But I would be lying if I said I downright hated it. I'd say I'm more annoyed by a lot of things, but nowhere near hating anything in the movie. That comes later. If you hate it, I can understand why. But if you're like me and can still find it enjoyable at times, then keep enjoying it, because it's really not the worst Star Wars movie. So I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. So even though I had my problems with Force Awakens, I still had a lot of fun with it, and I still look back on it fondly. And even if I had some problems, I was excited to see where the movies would go next. There seem to be a lot of people who are having their doubts with these newer movies, but that will all change with the next one. There's no trouble behind the scenes, the director didn't get fired halfway through filming, and the trailers look pretty badass. Man, this is going to be the best Star Wars movie ever, right? Right?
That's how we're gonna win. Not fighting what we hate. Saving what we love.
I didn't hate The Last Jedi the first time I saw it. In fact, I actually felt pretty confused. I didn't hate what I had just seen, but I also didn't love it. I said earlier that my hype for Force Awakens was pre-Last Jedi. What I meant by that was The Last Jedi was the first movie where I realized I shouldn't let hype and nostalgia blind me from judging movies. A lot of people have those movies and other pieces of media that teach them not to overhype stuff. It's good to be excited for things, but never to the point that you have unrealistic expectations, especially when something doesn't meet those expectations and you're left angry and disappointed. I've learned to accept that not everything I get excited for is going to win me over. Sometimes I'm going to be disappointed, and that's okay. I may not have liked things like Justice League, Dr. Sleep, or Incredibles 2, but I never once felt anger because these ruined the originals. I still love The Shining and The Incredibles. They're still some of my favorite movies of all time. Just because something has a terrible sequel or prequel doesn't mean it's ruined or tarnished. The original still exists. I can still criticize these newer movies, but not for ruining something. So even though I don't like The Last Jedi, I know that it didn't ruin the originals. They still exist and I still love them. The Last Jedi didn't ruin anything. It still sucks though, so let's make fun of it. I probably should have known I wasn't going to like The Last Jedi. From the first trailer, the signs were already there. I probably should have known something was off when Poe says,
"We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down."
And all I could think when I watched that was, oh, already? Now The Last Jedi gets a lot of hate and I kinda understand why. It's pretty consistent with other Disney produced movies. On the surface, meh. Nothing great, nothing awful, just pretty mediocre, inoffensive stuff. But there's so many people claiming it's either a masterpiece or a shit show, and neither side will give up their claim. Every time one side claims their argument, whether it's amazing or it's shit, the other side follows up with doubling down with their argument. But we get that. We've heard it a million times. Last Jedi discourse is a video topic of its own. And there are plenty of options to choose from. I want to talk about the movie itself though. What is it I like and dislike? First, I'll go over the stuff I do like. The cinematography is amazing. This movie has some of the best shots in Star Wars history. It's easily the best looking Star Wars movie. The music is also great. I mean, it's John Williams. Of course it's good music. Not the best in the series, but great nonetheless. And that's it. Here's where the takes really start to get spicy. So if you've heard about The Last Jedi, then you've probably heard about this term, subverting expectations. That's apparently what director Rian Johnson had in mind for this movie, to subvert expectations of what it meant to be a Star Wars movie. Force Awakens had opened the floodgates for fan theories and predictions for this new generation of movies. Who's who and what's what? Who is Rey and why is she so powerful with the Force? Who is Snoke and why is he the main baddie for this trilogy? Where has Luke been all this time and what has he been doing? All of these questions were hopefully going to be answered in the next installment, seeing as how JJ didn't in the previous one. And with all these different theories, each one being more ridiculous than the last, how do you come up with answers that seem both shocking yet make a lot of sense? Well, you change people's perspectives on what's important in these stories. Rather than asking who's related to Rey, ask who Rey is as a person. What are her weaknesses? What are her goals? Rather than asking where has Luke been all this time, ask who is Luke truly? Some legendary badass or just a man? Rather than asking who Snoke is and how he got to power, ask does it matter? Maybe he's just a puppet himself, maybe it doesn't matter who he is, but rather what he's done. By asking different questions than usual, Star Wars starts to become more interesting, and more than just a silly space opera. Would have been nice if the movie actually executed these ideas better, and that's my main issue with The Last Jedi. Not that the direction it took things ruined everything dear to Star Wars, but rather that these new ideas weren't executed well. Rey not being related to any previously established character would be interesting if that was the direction they were going for originally, and that doesn't seem to be the case. Hell, Luke trying to kill Kylo could have been heartbreaking. Again, if it was executed better. In fact, let's really think about this scene, because Luke and Kylo's first confrontation is a very important scene, not just for this movie, but for the entire trilogy. This is where Luke finds out he's already lost Kylo to the dark side, or at least he thinks so. So, to make sure a sequel trilogy never happens, Luke attempts to kill him, but immediately says, nah, that's not right. Then Kylo wakes up and freaks out and brings down the roof and kills all the Jedi. Like grandfather, like son? Then Luke can't deal with the failure of his ways, and so he fucks off to the very first Jedi Temple. Isn't this like the third first Jedi Temple we've been to in Star Wars? I feel like we keep going to the first Jedi something or other, and it's always some stupid fucking rocky area. And he lives out the rest of his life a bitter failure. Now I want to make something perfectly clear. Yes, I do not like the characterization of Luke in The Last Jedi, but it's not because of any attack on my nostalgia. I'm not one of those Reddit bros or man-child fanatic strawmen that Last Jedi defenders will claim are the only people who dislike in this movie. I wasn't expecting Luke to be some almighty badass with 20 lightsabers and who could move a fucking planet with his mind, because that's not Luke Skywalker. I've said in my previous Star Wars videos that Luke is a dweeb and not very powerful, nor is he the most confident of characters. However, and this is very important, he's not incompetent. Luke may not be the most badass character in Star Wars who can save everyone and look cool doing it, but he is the most interesting and relatable. So you know what? I can believe Luke screwing up in some way to cause Kylo to turn to the dark side. The parts I can't believe are how Kylo turns and what Luke does afterwards. Kylo turns to the dark side because of a misunderstanding in the most sitcomish way.
And I was left with shame. And with
And then Luke gives up. The character who dropped everything at the very thought of his friends being in danger. The character who refused to kill both Darth Vader and Palpatine, no matter how messy the situation got. Luke gives up because the ways of the Jedi don't work. But he didn't do something that the Jedi would do, so how is this the way of the Jedi failing? How does any of this make sense? And then Luke learns the errors of his ways, causing him to show up last minute and stall the First Order and restore his legendary status as the hero once more. Wow, this scene would be really emotional and tear-jerking if I cared. I know this may sound a bit harsh, but I've got to be honest and say it. I don't care for Luke in this movie. I especially didn't care when he died. Yeah, the one character I actually cared for in the series didn't feel anything when he disappeared. I was about as emotionally invested as when Gwen Stacy died in Amazing Spider-Man 2, or when Superman died in BVS, or when Pixar died when they made Cars 2. Way to subvert my expectations, Ryan. On the bright side, at least Knives Out was great. I'm sorry, but it's true. I just didn't care. And that's The Last Jedi. It's not good. I didn't even go over the Canto Bight scenes or the Poe and Holdo scenes, but I feel like those are always the scenes everyone goes for when talking about how The Last Jedi sucks. I wanted to talk about the other stuff that bothered me, that not many people talk about. At the end of the day, I can't say I liked it, but I wouldn't say I'm so angry at it that I would get pissed off seeing people say good things about it. That's the problem with the next movie. I guess in a twisted way, I'm kinda glad I didn't enjoy The Last Jedi. It made me more in tune with my excitement for movies and other media, and I no longer have unrealistic hype for anything anymore. I know what I'm watching is just a movie, and I can't let it get me angered over trivial stuff. I'm still gonna say it sucks and criticize it for getting a lot of things wrong, but I won't get angry over it. If you like it, fine, but as for me, 4 out of 10, it's not good, it's not awful, just kinda boring and full of a lot of missed opportunities. Alright, so to recap before we get to episode 9, I really liked The Force Awakens, but I do have my issues with it. I really didn't like The Last Jedi, but I will admit it's not the worst thing in the world. So that leaves us with the final chapter for Star Wars. Yep, not just the final chapter of the trilogy, but the ultimate finale for the mainline episodic Star Wars movies. That's right, the franchise that's been going since 1977 is coming to an end. For real this time. Hopefully. Now you may be thinking, that doesn't seem right. This movie doesn't feel like the end of an era. Hell, the upteenth Marvel movie that came out months before this feels more like the end of an era, and that's not even the final chapter of its storyline. But don't worry guys, Disney has got this. JJ is back and we all like the one he worked on, so that means this one's going to be just as good, if not better, right? Well, no. It's actually a lot worse.
You're his granddaughter. You are a
Big guy.
For you.
Now I know I said I wasn't as hyped for Rise of Skywalker as I was Force Awakens or Last Jedi, but in a way, I kinda was. I wasn't excited for this movie because I wanted to see how Star Wars would end, I wanted to see how big of a shit show it was going to be. There were many factors for me being hyped for this. Chris Terrio, writer of BVS and Justice League, was co-writing it with JJ. The fact that Palpatine and Lando were back, so Disney still hadn't learned their lesson with Darth Maul and Solo, and quite possibly the biggest reason of all, JJ saying fuck it! Abrams has been quoted saying fuck it for Rise of Skywalker, meaning they were going to go all out for this movie, and honestly, I was all for it. I wanted to see how far they were willing to go. I wanted to be offended, disgusted. I wanted to see fan favorites get run through the mud and retcon after retcon until Star Wars was nothing but a muddled up fuckfest worse off than the DCEU. And you know what? They couldn't even do that right. Rise of Skywalker is bad, but not as bad as I was hoping. That's the thing with this movie. I either wanted it to be so good it's good, or so bad it's good. and it ended up being neither, and it was just bad. But why, you may be asking? How does this movie screw up worse than the other two? Hell, how does it screw up worse than the prequels? Well, again, like most Disney-produced films, on the surface, seems harmless. Not good, not bad, just whatever. But then when you really start to think about it, you realize this is honestly one of the most bullshit movies in years. Yes, even worse than The Last Jedi. One thing Rise of Skywalker brings to light is one of my biggest issues with these movies as a whole. The characters. There is not a single character from any of these movies that I liked, even the original characters. Now I could go every single one of them, but I don't want to. So to make it simple, let's only talk about a couple. First off, let's talk about Rey, and why she's one of the weakest Star Wars characters ever. I won't go as far as to say she's an awful character, but she's not very good either. And it's this movie that really shows what's wrong with her. The writers just can't decide on who she is as a person. Is she supposed to be a modern Luke Skywalker where she's not familiar with the world and is more like a vessel for the audience to relate to? Or is she another Jesus baby like Anakin? Well, concerning nobody had a plan for these movies, it keeps on changing. In The Force Awakens, she's written in the most fan-fiction-y way possible. She's able to beat up anyone that crosses her path, she's able to use the Force with ease, she can work any machine that comes into contact with her, she's told she's special because a lightsaber said so. She's special essentially because she's the main character, not the other way around where she's the main character because she's special. Despite my distaste for The Last Jedi, I will give props to Rian Johnson for attempting to make Rey more interesting. By making her parents nobodies, she's not related to any previously powerful family. She's someone who can establish themselves as a brand new character. It's the same thing like when Luke was a nobody in A New Hope. She's a breath of fresh air for main characters. Still doesn't explain the ease with the Force or why Luke's lightsaber calls to her, but hey, it's the thought that counts. Well then, JJ and Chris made one of the funniest retcons in the entire trilogy. Rey's parents were nobodies. But her grandfather is Palpatine, the most powerful and evil Sith Lord to ever rule the galaxy.
What?
Rey is no longer a nobody, she's the most important somebody ever. Essentially the granddaughter of Sith Hitler. Sithler? I want to talk about this reveal for a bit, because I remember a while back seeing someone claim this be the worst line of dialogue in Star Wars history. And at first, I didn't see why. Like, yeah, it's bad. But the worst when these exist?
I recognized your foul stench.
Some moove milker put a compressor on the ignition line.
I thought it was a mistake to
I'm just kidding. I don't like sand is gold. But then I thought more about what the line represents rather than the delivery. And I realized just how much this line shows how little this movie knows about Star Wars. First off, as if it wasn't entirely obvious that yes, because she would be his granddaughter, that would in fact make her a Palpatine. So right away it just shows that the filmmakers take us all for idiots. But then really think about how out of place this line seems within Star Wars. Forget about fan obsessions with who's related to who. When in the Star Wars universe has a character ever said, "You are a Skywalker," or "You are a Kenobi"?
In the case of Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader,
"You are a Jetster."
What the
When has a character's last name ever been of any importance within the universe? Again, forget about fans obsessing over last names. Think about within the universe when a name has ever mattered. This is the reason I hate that moment in Solo when Han gets the origin of his name explained. It's not important who this character is as a person. No, their name is what matters. That's the part that's worth paying attention to. Names only matter to one group of people when it comes to Star Wars fans. So when Kylo says out of the blue, "You're a Palpatine," it's out of place within the universe and spits in the face of one of the only cool ideas from The Last Jedi. Oh yeah, speaking of Palpatine, he's back. Because Snoke got mauled in the last movie, now the sequel trilogy doesn't have a big baddie. So who better than to drag the guy who's been the big baddie in the last two trilogies? Even though bringing him back totally delegitimizes Vader's redemption arc, but whatever, the prequels and sequels excel at delegitimizing the original trilogy, so I'm not surprised at this point. But hey, it's Palpatine, you know, the best character in Revenge of the Sith. He's bound to be a lot of fun in this, right?
No.
He's so lame. I'm not just talking about him doing nothing for the majority of the movie. Even his introduction into the movie is lame. The opening crawl literally just says, "Hey, Palpatine's back. Get fucking excited." No build-up, no mystery, just, hey, by the way, he's back. Deal with it. Not once in this movie does him being back ever feel as incredible as it should be. He never has the same presence as he's had in the past. He's just kinda there. But hey, at least he gets uber ultra force lightning. That's cool, right? Right?
Come on now.
hands? Lightning with my hands. Lightning with my hands. Lightning with my hands.
And then just as easy as it was to bring him back, he's killed just as easily. Why? Well, because episode 10 isn't gonna happen. We don't need him anymore. So this time, for real, he's dead. And the last character I want to talk about is Kylo Ren. Now some people think Kylo isn't that bad and actually consider him to be the best part of the trilogy. I don't. Sure, he's played by Adam Driver, you know, an actually good actor, and hey, he's a good change of pace for Star Wars. The blood-related Skywalker is actually the villain this time, I think. My biggest issue with Kylo is how inconsistent he is. Much like Rey, hell, maybe even more so, the writers just can't decide what to do with him. Is he strong with the Force, or is he not? Is he pure evil who commits unforgivable acts of malice, or is there still light left in him? Should we feel bad for him, or should we ship him in one of the most disgusting relationships to come out of a Disney property? Oh yeah, don't think I wasn't gonna mention the Reylos. The people who only like the sequels because it makes canon their disgusting ship between Rey and Kylo. This is such a bad ship, and it blows my mind these people exist. Oh, but Hal, they're such a cute couple, and you don't have to be so hard on Ben Swallow. He's just a misunderstood bad boy. Such a bad boy, guys. He's just misunderstood.
The villagers.
Kill them all.
Well, whatever. I guess because before he skeks the Emperor is out of the movie, Rey and Kylo share their first kiss and only kiss, making Reylo canon. Why did they kiss? I don't know. But it just shows that Disney supports abusive relationships over gay ones, since they cut out the all-too-important scene of two women kissing for homophobic countries, but kept this in. Don't tell me SJWs run Disney when they pull shit like this all the time. Alright, what else is there to talk about? Snoke was Palpatine's puppet the whole time. That's stupid, but whatever. Rey's Darkseid storyline goes nowhere. Not surprising. Finn was demoted to side character and simp just so then the white woman could be the main character. Very racist. Hux is lame. Poe is lame. Rose is only on screen for like a minute because Disney was too scared to write her better. Ending totally rips off Endgame.
And I'm all the Jedi.
Oh yeah, and Chewie gets a medal, because this movie still wasn't done spinning in my face. See guys, now Chewie finally got his medal. After all these years, I'm so glad the movie acknowledged a fucking joke within the fandom and not tell a decent story. Fucking great. And then we get to the final scene of the movie, and I really want to emphasize how dumb it is. Rey buries the two lightsabers. Oh yeah, because Leia had a lightsaber too. That was important, except it wasn't. Into the sands of Tatooine. Why? I don't know. Maybe the movie just wants us to feel that warm nostalgia because, hey, I recognize that place. You like this movie because you remember that.
I clapped when I saw it!
And before the movie can let you go, we get a random fucking desert hermit who just so happens to be walking by ask who Rey is. Rey says, she's Rey. The woman then asks, Rey who? Again, because last names are all of a sudden super important in this movie. Rey looks to the horizon and sees the Force ghosts of Luke and Leia, turns back to the random bitch and says, Rey Skywalker. She lets go of her Palpatine name after suffering for it, minutes, and embraces her true identity. The last name of the guy who told her to get off of his property and the woman who was CGI'd into the movie because she's dead in real life. And so, Rey and BB-8 look at the twin suns, awaiting a new chapter, a new beginning, a fresh start for more Star Wars movies.
Like that's ever gonna happen. What a load.
I'm sorry, I can't take this ending seriously. It's so stupid. In fact, a lot of this movie is stupid when I really think about it. There's so much more I didn't even mention. I hate The Rise of Skywalker and what it represents. It's lazy, unoriginal, pandering in the worst way, bullshit. And it doesn't even end there, because even now, months after it was in theaters, there are all these articles and tweets talking about how certain plot points weren't mentioned and how this meant that and that meant this. Even more bullshit to cover up how messy the movie is. Ironically, in the process, making it even more messy. Rise of Skywalker is the worst Star Wars movie ever. Worse than the prequels, worse than the spin-offs, yes, even worse than The Last Jedi. And you know what? I wasn't expecting that. I'm kinda shocked that this movie made me more frustrated than The Last Jedi. Don't get me wrong, Last Jedi still sucks in my opinion. I don't like it in the slightest, but I'll give it this. It tried something new. It didn't succeed at all, but at the very least, it tried to be different. Rise of Skywalker couldn't even be bothered to try anything different or new or unique, and it failed even worse. If you're one of those people who like this, fuck you. 4 out of 10, worst Star Wars movie, at least it wasn't the holiday special. Maybe you still think the prequels are bad. Maybe you were so insulted by them that you refuse to believe these movies could have been any worse. Personally, I don't think these movies are worse than the prequels. I know I said that I consider the prequels better, but I was mostly just saying that to be hyperbolic. In all seriousness, no, the Disney movies are not worse than the prequels. But they're not better either. I'd say both trilogies are about as equal in terms of how much lamer they are compared to the originals, and how embarrassing they come across. And it's a real shame because they could have been so much better than the prequels. The prequels were bad and unfortunately did put Star Wars in a bad place, dividing fans and showing just how toxic and protective some fans can get. So, here was Disney's chance to really fix the situation. Make a brand new trilogy with brand new characters and remind audiences why they fell in love with the originals in the first place. However, it seems these new films did the bare minimum when it came to being better than the prequels. They didn't bring back George Lucas, they had more practical effects, and they tried to be more like the originals. They still didn't plan out anything, so they still ended up being just as messy as the prequels. But hey, at least they used more puppet creatures instead of CGI. Good job. I want to make it very clear that I take no pleasure in shitting on these movies. Like I said, I was all for this trilogy. I was excited to see where they would go. But I don't want to lie to myself for the sake of not coming across as a troll. I don't like this trilogy as a whole, and now that I've seen it all, I can't say they were all worth watching. I may not like the trilogy, but this hasn't ruined my feelings on the originals. They're still there, and I still love them. I still consider A New Hope to be my favorite movie of all time, and I still love Empire and Jedi. I'm still a massive fan of Star Wars, even if I don't like some of the movies. So to wrap up before this video gets any longer, the Disney movies may not have solved the divide among Star Wars fans, and may have arguably made things a lot worse. No, that's it. Well, I did it. I talked about all the Star Wars trilogies. And there's still more Star Wars stuff to talk about, but those will be video topics for another day, so be on the lookout for more content. Thanks for watching, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.